Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to a very triumphant edition of the Falcoholic Live's Week 6 post-game show as the Falcons took down the San Francisco 49ers in dominant fashion, 28-14. They, similar to the Browns game, I think the Falcons found a way to beat their opponent at their own game, certainly took advantage of a depleted defensive line and showed that they can really run the ball against pretty much anyone, especially when you're missing guys up front. And the offense as a whole was really sharp today. I thought Marcus Mariota had arguably his best game. We're going to get to all that. Joining us today for the commentary, you know him, Dave Choate, at the Falcoholic himself. Dave, how we doing?
We're doing great, man. That was awesome.
Yeah, we're rolling. We're rolling now. And, you know, notwithstanding the actual game, which of course we're going to spend the majority of this show talking about, I had said in the previous shows, like, this is a really bad, hard 3-game stretch, but if they could just get one W out of this, then they only need to go 4-2 over that more winnable 6-game stretch that's coming up to go into the bye with a winning record. And they got a W in this 3-game stretch already with one game to go. So very nice turn of events there.
Yeah, and it's just such a big deal for this team in general because, you know, as banged up as the 49ers are, they're still a really good football team. And, like, showing that you can do all of the things that, you know, plagued them a week ago, get off to a fast start when they couldn't before, hold on to a lead when they've had trouble with that all year, stick to the run, get Mariota really playing his best football of the year. I thought, these are all things that have been in question at one time or another. And one of the things about the Falcons in the past has been that the narratives tend to take hold, right? With good reason. They tend to, blow games where they have a lead. They tend to not be able to catch up. Players who have bad trend lines continue to trend badly. So seeing all of that blown up in one game, who knows if it lasts all season, but it was pretty fun to watch. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, like, I think we all started to get this internal panic as soon as the Falcons lost like 3 cornerbacks, and we were like, oh God, well, this is just the recipe now for this defense to just start giving up big plays, and that's how this is going to go, and it did not happen. And shout out to the throwback hat, by the way, I just noticed that. But they didn't. Like, the reserve corners who we've seen sparingly but have had to play with Isaiah Oliver out, like Mike Ford, this is not his first snaps of the season. D. Alford, certainly not his first snaps of the season. Darren Hall getting a lot of playtime in this one, not being a liability. Like, they've set these reserves up now to have all this experience because of Isaiah Oliver's injury. So in some way, him being out had kind of prepared the secondary to weather, temporarily at least, some injuries and hold firm. And look, the 49ers live and die by that short passing, breaking, tackles style. And when the game was close, they were dominating the defense with it early in this game. And then the game got out of hand really fast, and big props to the Falcons taking advantage of some 49ers mistakes to make that happen. But they couldn't do anything else. Like, this is a team that's got Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, and Ayuk had an amazing game on my fantasy bench today. And this man just out there playing out of his mind, and they still don't have a deep passing game because they just can't hit it consistently with Jimmy Garoppolo. Falcons fans, have heard this complaint about Marcus Mariota, but Mariota beyond reproach today, right? 13 of 14, only 129 yards passing, but 2 of those passes for touchdowns, 6 for 50 as a runner, and a rushing touchdown to go with it. Let's start with Marcus Mariota because he's been much maligned over the past 2 weeks, had 2 pretty bad games back to back. As a runner, we've sort of said, like, we need to get him more involved, and the Falcons seem to have committed to that now. What do you think about Marcus Mariota now, Dave, after engineering a dominant, if low volume, passing attack in Week 6?
He played his ideal game. I think that Marcus Mariota, has some limitations as a quarterback to prevent him from being an elite guy. And we all know that. I think even his biggest fans know, we're not going to talk about Mariota as maybe one of the best quarterbacks in football. But one of the things that frustrated me through the first 5 weeks, as somebody who obviously likes Ritter, but also likes Mariota and wants to see this offense thrive, is like, we weren't seeing him at his best. He was making mistakes that, started to feel like they were just part of his game, but didn't have to be, right? Like we had seen Mariota in Tennessee and in brief stretches with the Raiders playing pretty mistake-free football. And so we knew that he could be better than this. And so seeing him go out there and really just play to his strengths, run the ball really effectively. He had a ton of great short to mid-range throws. He was very accurate on those. He made plays, he extended plays. He just played really well. That to me was like the ideal Marcus Mariota experience. And I think it was really important because I know Aaron Freeman wrote for us this week, what's going to happen in this game might determine whether the Falcons are forced to turn to Ritter more quickly or if they're going to stick to Mariota as long as possible. And I think pretty definitively, Mariota said, you got to stick with me because this is what I can give you, at the height of my powers against a very good team is like pretty mistake-free football, like as mistake-free as we've seen from any quarterback under center in the last couple of years for Atlanta. And then just making the plays that he did with his legs. It was a great game for him. I'm really happy for him. And I think the thing is now is if he can start stringing this together, the Falcons are more dangerous, but Mariota also becomes a very dangerous player that, isn't looked at by defenses and fans and so forth as a potential liability, but as a really dangerous weapon, which he can be. So
Yeah, yeah. And the Falcons just offensively, again, passing game, not a lot of attempts, only 14 throws in this game, and certainly the way it played out with the Falcons basically having a lead for much of the game, except for a little bit of time before the half. I mean, the carries, this was the season high. I think there were over 40 carries or close to 39 carries, I think, or let's see. No, 40 exactly, excuse me. 40 exactly carries in this game, a season high for the Falcons. It wasn't incredibly efficient on the ground, other than Marcus Mariota with the 6 for 50. Huntley was 16 carries for 59 yards. That's only 3.7 per tote. And Tyler Algier was 15 for 51, which is only 3.4 per tote. But it doesn't matter because they still racked up an absurd 168 rushing yards against the NFL's number one rushing defense coming into this game. Obviously, the 49ers down Nick Bosa. That's probably the biggest loss they could have suffered in this one. But they've been without Javon Kinlaw and Arik Armstead for several weeks, and they were still shutting down opposing running games. What do you think that says about the Falcons, David? Is it just the running game just that good that they can just run the ball against basically any defense? It doesn't matter how good your run defense is?
Yeah, I think there's probably an exception lurking somewhere out there, but even as banged up as they were, this is a really good 49ers run defense. And I think it does say that the Falcons have found, and the scary thing for me, I keep coming back to this, is like, this is not a finished product. Like Elijah Wilkinson, as well as he has played, and maybe he gets a long-term deal, not expected to be a long-term starter. Who knows if Caleb McGarry is? You don't know if you have a finished product in the backfield. You got two guys on injured reserve who you were counting on to be two of your top guys, and they're still doing this. So to me, given the state of personnel that they have, given where they are, given their commitment to the run, yeah, they can absolutely run at least decently against anybody. And given that that's what they want to do, given that that's what keys so much of what they do effectively on offense, I think that's pretty spectacular.
Yeah. I mean, it is. It's crazy to watch. We've mentioned it before on previous shows that this was the 31st ranked rushing attack in the league last year, both in terms of total yardage and yards per carry. So what a turnaround. The Falcons just continue to pound the rock with 168 total rushing yards in this game. Again, the efficiency wasn't necessarily there in this one as much as the Falcons, I think, were over 5 yards per carry going into this game on the season. That's probably going to drop a little bit after this one, but it sort of doesn't matter when you win 28-14 and you could just slam that ball in there 40 times in a game. And Dave, clearly the secret to success was they got to 35 rushing attempts, because as you know, when teams get to 35 rushing attempts, that means they win the game. So really, they were just trying to run out the clock as fast as possible, just getting to that 35 rushing attempts. And that, I think, was the actual key, nothing else, because as you know, once a team gets to 35 rushing attempts, the game is over. So terrific work there by the Falcons. Yeah.
I believe when you get to 35 rushing attempts and when you complete all but one pass in a game, teams are like 17-0. So
yeah,
I just
the game ends at that point.
It's so important, these numbers that are definitive. So Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do think, obviously, if you do run the ball 35 times, you've been successful. And if you do complete all but one pass with your quarterback, you're probably in a good position to win. Now, whether that's because you imposed your will on a team or that's just how the game flow went, sure, that's a question. But it is a positive, if not a marker of success. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I do want to get to a donation here from Corey with the $5. Thanks so much, Corey. He says 12 personnel, 13 personnel, 14 personnel. Who cares? What a game plan by Smith of mixing up the formations, keeping the Niners on their heels all day. Been tough on Smith, and rightfully so, but he is earning my trust this year with better game plans. I agree. I think that maybe he really did just need a year to get his feet wet, to get settled as a head coach, because what we saw in Tennessee was exactly this. Like, that's why we were so excited for this hire. That's why I was sort of pounding the table for him the entire previous season. Like, we need to go get Arthur Smith. It's because you watch that Tennessee offense and you see really smart stuff. And, like, sure, the Titans had A.J. Brown, but otherwise, that wasn't necessarily a star-studded offense outside of Derrick Henry. And Ryan Tannehill, nobody's definition of this just fantastic, amazing quarterback, but he was efficient. And they were very creative in the red zone, and that's what the Falcons are right now with my son, Michael Pruitt, my new son. He's being dubbed son now, even though he's not on the roster yet, but we're going to get there, I think. Michael Pruitt scoring touchdowns. They're just bringing guys in from wherever. They're making it work. They're getting it done, and it's just a very impressive showing from Smith that he's able to score 28 points on the NFL's best defense, which I believe hadn't allowed more than 20 in the season to this point. So, injuries are definitely a factor. This 49ers defense, not at full strength, clearly, but very impressive day by the offense. There's just really not enough nice things you can say, other than maybe that the efficiency of the run game wasn't incredible. But again, who cares when you're up 14 points? So, yeah, I was trying to look at any. I mean, obviously, you love to see it with Kyle Pitts getting his first touchdown. Only 3 catches in this game, but does get the touchdown on American soil finally. Any thoughts on that one, Dave?
My thoughts are USA, USA, USA. But yeah, no, it was great to see that. I think one of the frustrations from a fantasy football perspective is if you have Kyle Pitts, if you have Drake London, if you have Cordarrelle Patterson when he gets back, you're not going to know week to week necessarily which one of them is going to blow up, and you're going to have some frustrating weeks. But I do respect that this offense has gotten to the point where it's a different guy every week who's going to blow up a little bit and who's going to be your most impactful player because they have multiple weapons. And, not to keep harping on the same point, but this is not a finished roster yet. And you've still got, Kyle Pitts coming back from injury, making a major impact, finally scoring his first touchdown on American soil, which is a big deal because somebody as talented as Pitts should have way more touchdowns by now just by accident, right? And so hopefully this is a sign of things to come. But week to week, the only guy who has consistently put up a couple of impactful catches is Lamade Zaccheaus, of all people. So this is an offense that can count on different people to do the job every week, and that more than anything introduces the kind of volatility and unpredictability that I think Arthur Smith really likes. So happy for Pitts. I wouldn't expect him to do this again next week, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you're only throwing the ball 14 times in a game and having maybe the lowest number of passing attempts in the league, there's just not going to be a lot of passes to go around. There just aren't. Even Drake London got 3 catches. Lamade Zaccheaus led the team with 4. So this is not a high volume passing offense. You're not going to see terrific numbers right now. This is not, I think, what they necessarily want long term, because this style of offense works terrific if you can get a lead and hold it and that sort of thing, which to their credit, they've been able to do several times this year. But when they get up against really good teams, especially good offenses, they're going to need to be able to throw the ball more effectively. And, will Mariota be the quarterback for that eventual version of this team? Maybe not, but you certainly have to give him his due for a great game this week, and he threw the ball as well as could be hoped for. And this one, and the Falcons go out there and get that 14-point W. The Falcons won this game, scored 28 points, under 300 yards total. So this is not necessarily something you're going to see replicated a lot in terms of the scoring. But the Falcons got it done, took advantage of Jimmy Garoppolo ending his turnover-free streak, thankfully, against the Falcons. And even though they only ran, I think they ran actually one fewer play than the 49ers overall in this game, but they controlled the clock for 6, 7 more minutes in total. So great job by them. Great job by the offense. But the defense deserves some credit too. They were getting cut up in that second quarter, especially allowing 14 points. But they did get, of course, the fumble return touchdown. They came to play in the second half and really shut down the 49ers offense, made them really work for every yard. And just, I mean, props to Dean Pease for making the adjustments, because that second quarter was embarrassing. And I tweeted about it. Now everyone's mad at me. But, like, you guys were thinking the same thing watching that, right? Like, oh, I can't believe this is happening again. The Tampa Bay Bucks did the same exact thing. What are the Falcons going to be able to stop this? And to their credit, they adjusted and they did make the necessary stops. How do you feel about the defense in this one, Dave?
Pretty good overall. I think, especially late in the game when, excuse me, especially late in the game when the Falcons were down basically their entire starting group of cornerbacks, making plays still at the end, but even consistently throughout. This is not a team that is loaded with defensive talent, or at least proven defensive talent yet. And so to go out there against, one of the brighter offensive minds in the league, a team with plenty of weapons on a day when, Brandon Ayuk, who isn't always a weapon, was terrific most of the day. That was great. I think I was impressed not only by the adjustments, not only by like the timely plays, which the Falcons have gotten really good at, taking advantage of turnover opportunities, things like Richie Grant's pressure on third down that forced a bad throw from Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, situationally, they're doing a terrific job. So overall, a really strong day from them. I do think that we need to remember for maybe even next week, when Cincinnati brings a very good, passing attack to bear, that this game would have looked a little different. I think they still would have won had Jimmy Garoppolo been able to connect on like any of those 4 or 5 deep shots he took today that were just missed. So, a little luck helps in the NFL. We know that sometimes that has to happen, especially for a defense. It's not a finished product, but I was really impressed by how hard they battled, how they were able to, forestall a 49ers comeback that looked like it was a sure thing at one point, and how much they got done late in the game when they were down key players. So a really good day for them overall.
Yeah, it was an inspiring performance after some early struggles. This has been a habit of theirs. Last week against the Bucks, they did the exact same thing. They were getting crushed early. They make the plays in the second half that the Falcons should have had an opportunity to go win that game. And seeing the Bucks, lose this week and get crushed by the Steelers, it makes you feel like maybe the Falcons would have had a chance to really win that game and be 4-2 right now, or 5-2, I guess it would be if you flip the two. Let's see, 4-2. It would be 4-2. Math is not my best thing here, but it's a shame that we didn't get to see that final drive perhaps work out for the Falcons, but they do come away with a much needed win here against the 49ers, and I'm happy about that. Held the Niners rushing attack, which I believe was 6th in the NFL, to just 51 yards on the ground, and we know Shanahan's a guy that doesn't go away from the run when the team is behind. And honestly, for them, there wasn't really a need to until the second half, when they really got behind and just couldn't move the ball on offense anymore. And it's impressive, certainly. Obviously, they're missing Elijah Mitchell. That's a tough name to say fast, apparently. And he's been on my fantasy bench for most of the season, so I'm not bitter at all about that. But they didn't run the ball with anyone well in this one, and even Deebo Samuel didn't really get an opportunity to carry the ball. How impressed were you with the Falcons' run defense that doesn't actually have a real proven true nose tackle anymore, with Anthony Rush being cut? Somehow now they've had 2 excellent games back-to-back against the run.
Yeah, and I think that is a credit to Pease, and it's also a credit to a lot of unsung guys, right? Like, this team was down Michael Walker, which I do think was impactful. Even though Troy Anderson had a pretty good game, you don't have your guy with the green dot out there. You don't have a player who's experienced in Atlanta, was here last year, sort of making those play calls and guiding this defense. And he's a good run defender in his own right. You lost Taquan Graham for a little bit today, and you're just missing, sort of up front, those elite run stopping players that I think long-term Atlanta would like to have. So when you put all those factors together, it was a hugely impressive game for them again. I think the 49ers kind of get by week to week on relying on guys who are just guys at running back, but they do it because they call really good plays, they have really good blocking, and these guys are just physical and fast enough to take advantage of the opportunities. And I think, the Falcons knew what the game plan was going to be. And if they struggled consistently stopping those short passes, those screen passes, they were ready for the run today. And I think it's a credit to the guys up front that, like, you cut Anthony Rush, just a week ago, which was a surprise to me. You lost one of your better guys for a little bit, and you were still able to put it together up front, enough to keep this running game in check, and even force a huge mistake with Jeff Wilson. I know it kind of looked like he did a lot of that fumbling work himself on that play, but I do think that Troy Anderson and Rashawn Evans helped out there. So a huge day for the run defense. And again, I'm saying this for like the third or fourth time today, but you look at this team now versus where they could be a year from now, the fact that they're already doing this well on something that's a core focus for them is really encouraging.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they are getting it done with guys that, Caleb Huntley sat on the practice squad for weeks before he was elevated to the roster. Like, this is a guy that really fits their style perfectly, and just credit to the offensive line for getting it done. And also, yeah, it should be pointed out that Timmy Horn actually had a really good game today. He's someone that has struggled a lot when asked to play, but when the team cut Anthony Rush, the sort of expectation from me was like, okay, this staff really likes Timmy Horn because this is the only nose tackle left now. Obviously, they really like Abdullah Anderson too, who has, I think, played quite well. But that has been one of the more interesting developments on this team, which is seeing them sort of reshuffle this defensive line, which is maybe the biggest weakness on the team outside of Grady Jarrett, of course. But let me read off another donation here from Corey with the $5. Thank you so much, Corey. He says, Troy Anderson was a difference maker out there today. When you saw the ball, you saw 44. Also loved the retro look, and the Falcons brought out the Dirty Bird dance. Even Alfred threw up the two legit today. Also, George Kittle has a weird helmet. Yeah, I've never actually seen a helmet like Kittle's. That was a new one for me. But yeah, I mean, talking about the linebackers, you mentioned Rashawn Evans. I think he's had a really good year in coverage, which is always known as like his Achilles heel. Like, he could not do it. So he had a great pass breakup. His like PFF coverage grade is awesome this year. Like, just he's been a really nice surprise. And then you got Troy Anderson coming in here. I saw him go one-on-one with Deebo Samuel one play and just completely, fly off of him, which that was to be expected. But other than that play, Troy Anderson's been awesome. And he had that, honestly, potentially touchdown saving special teams tackle as well. You see him just flying from off screen and make that tackle. Trey Anderson's balling out with his opportunity here. He's obviously still really raw as a linebacker, but when you're that athletic, it almost doesn't matter on some plays. What do you think about the play of the linebackers so far, Dave?
I think it's been really good. And I think long term, it's going to be really interesting to see, does this team, stick with Michael Walker and Troy Anderson? Do they try to keep Evans around too and really use all three? But in the here and now, I think it's telling that the last 2 years the Falcons have chosen in the early going, and obviously Anderson's getting on the field more than granted, early on last year, that they're focusing on special teams for a couple of guys who they aren't 100% sure are ready for big roles, because it is like a read and react situation so often. And Anderson has shown in the early going that he's very, very good at, once he figures out where a play is going, getting to it and disrupting it. He's blocked one punt. He's almost blocked another one. He made that big play today that saved a potential touchdown on the return. He always seems to show up at the right time against the run in particular. And that is something that we already know that Evans and Walker do well. And we already know that Evans, like you said, has done much better in coverage than you would have expected. Going from a year ago when, Aluakon was pretty good, I think, but did struggle in coverage, and Deion Jones certainly did, to this, where all of the linebackers are, having their moments. Certainly Anderson had a couple of issues today as a rookie starter, which is nothing. It's impressive that he's even out there and doing as well as he's doing. But this is a good, young, athletic group that is playing better than two established starters the Falcons had a year ago. So to me, again, hugely impressive that they're in the state that they're in, and they have a good problem going forward once Walker's healthy, of how you divvy this playing time up between three really capable guys.
Yeah, they certainly have some decisions to make there, but right now looking like a deep group with Nick Kwiatkowski, a veteran that we were like excited about when he signed, right before training camp, basically being inactive every week and just playing special teams right now. So that really tells you how much they like their young guys ahead of him on the depth chart, because Kwiatkowski's a starter. He was a starter for the Raiders the last couple of years, so they've got the depth there. Good on them for that. I just want to get to another Corey donation here with the $5 again. Thank you so much, Corey. Appreciate that, man. He says, found out today that I have to pay $4,000 in taxes. What? Still a great day. Okay, I'm glad. Yeah, they did get a dub for you at least. Hard week at work coming up, but I get to do it knowing we got that dub. Atlanta has the best group of sports teams in the country. Today's win is bigger than just today. Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting thing to bring up, and I think if you are one of the fans that was adamant that this could be a playoff team, 3-3 through week 6 is a position where you're right in the mix right now. And we said it over the last couple of weeks, right, that the Falcons really needed to get a W from this 3-game stretch. They were going to be big underdogs in probably all 3 games, but they needed to find a way to steal one. But if they do, it changes the next 6-game stretch, which is easier. They only need to now go 4-2 over that stretch, assuming they lose next week, instead of 5-1. And I think going 4-2 over that 6-game stretch, where really the Chargers are maybe the only team where the Falcons are not going to be favored over that stretch. This is looking like that could legitimately happen, or be like even like a favorite projection to happen based on what we've seen this team do. How do you feel now about the Falcons, Dave, sitting at 3-3 in week 6 and potentially, tied for first in the division with the Bucs losing and not looking particularly good? The Saints lost again. They're having their own set of struggles. How are you feeling now about this Falcons team potentially finding a way to maybe make some noise here?
I feel pretty good about it. Again, you don't know. It's a long season, right? Obviously, we saw some injuries pile up today that could be impactful for them. I think we got today against the 49ers, against all odds, really one of the better performances you could expect from this team. So there are things that could go wrong along the way. But all that being said, you have to feel good about where they are. You have to feel good about where they're going right now, because the schedule does get easier on paper. So unless this is the kind of team that wilts against weaker opponents, which past Falcons teams have done, they've shown that they can beat good, complete teams, even if they're a little bit banged up. And they're not going to be facing any good, complete teams for a few weeks there. More than once this season. You get the Panthers twice, you get some really bad football teams late in the year. So to me, they've shown enough to think that at 3-3, in the position they're in, we probably all, and I say all from the perspective of the staff, not necessarily fans who are really gung-ho, may have undershot their win total a little bit, because they certainly look good enough to win, 9 or 10 games in a weakened NFC South if things continue the way they do. And there are a lot of ifs with that, and I understand that. And so one of the things that I would say, similar to what I said before the season even started, is that enjoy what we're seeing right now, enjoy the improvement, because whether they finish with 9 wins or 6 wins and things, fall off as we go on, we've seen that this team is capable of some really good things, and we know that they have an opportunity to improve a lot in the offseason. So to me, this is probably going to be a pretty good season, maybe better than we expected. But even if it isn't, again, keep in mind that the arrow is pointing up on this team in a big way.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Falcons doing all this with just 63% of the cap, because they've got 37% of it tied up in dead money. By far the most dollar amount ever for an NFL team tied up in dead cap after the Deion Jones trade. They are still getting it done, finding ways to do it. And it's impressive. It would be great if they could get to a winning record, at some point, because they haven't done that since 2017, I believe. So I'm hoping they get there soon, but the Bengals are going to be a tough opponent. There's no way around that. So, that they're going to be underdogs in that one as well, but we've seen it. These guys do not shy away from any team. They, unlike last year where they went up against playoff caliber teams and they just got pantsed, this year, they're playing everybody tough. And we said it before the show, what are the chances that the Falcons' first game that's not a 1-score game, because every single game so far had been 1 score, is actually a 2-score game, but that they win. So crazy, awesome. Dave, I know you're short on time today, so I do want to give you an opportunity to duck out if you want to, if you need to go. So,
I do need to, but again, I just say, first of all, thanks for talking through all the tougher weeks, both this last year and this year. And also, like, this is a great win. Like, let's bask in the glow of this all week, and hopefully they can take it to the Bengals a week from now. We can feel really good about where this team is headed, and they can make some noise 1 year ahead of schedule because, you know, clearly we have been missing that long-term direction for a long time now. It's felt like this team has been a little bit rudderless, just trying to hang on to jobs and keep things going and find a magic bullet. And they really seem to have a long-term plan, a long-term philosophy, and the right people in the building to make it happen. So, it's worth celebrating. It's not a fluke win, whether they win a week from now or not. Like, this is a good thing. So feeling good about it. And thanks, Kev, for talking us through it.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dave, for coming on and helping out today. I know the fans love to see the hashtag Dave Meet, and maybe we will get this Q&A going soon. I promise, folks.
Yes.
With Dave, of course, being one of the highlight reel guests. So stay tuned for that. But it's been a busy week for everyone here at the Falcoholic. So give us some grace on that one. I appreciate all the patrons for their patience on that. But Dave, again, thank you so much. He's at the Falcoholic on Twitter. Or Words and Beer for other tweets. But otherwise, Dave, thanks so much for coming on today.
Absolutely. Take it easy. Go Falcons.
All right. Thank you, Dave. All right, guys. It's just me now. You just got me for the rest of the show, but we got lots to talk about. Lots of great stuff out here. We covered a lot of the main things. I did definitely want to get to Avery Williams, who had several great returns today that were crucial for setting the Falcons up with some good field position. Only 2 for 6 as a rusher, so he didn't have his traditional just one run for really good yardage in this one. But just a nice performance. And again, I think that we're seeing this team. I don't know if they necessarily expected going into this that they were going to have to run the ball 40 times, and this was going to be their identity as just being this completely run-first team, to the extent that they're only really throwing 14 passes in a win. But they've figured out a way to do that, and props to them. The offensive line, still not great at pass protection, to be clear, but again, as run blockers, they're getting it done at a high level, so props to them for that. And it's fun to watch this Falcons team actually dominate someone up front. It's happened a lot of weeks, so I think it's safe to say now that this is no longer a fluke, right? This is no longer, the Falcons rushing offense has gotten lucky against some poor opponents and all this stuff. They're going to remain a top 3 rushing offense after this game. The efficiency probably takes a little bit of a hit from this one, but again, just a really nice performance overall from this team. And the defense, look, to their credit, they still gave up almost 350 yards in this one, nearly 300 passing yards, but it just didn't matter because they played complementary football with the offense. They made the plays they needed to make. They did get a sack that got erased by penalty again. So this pass rush, still not a strength of this team, but man, it's fun to watch this team actually dominate an opponent, thoroughly. I think we all felt our hearts sort of drop after the 49ers got right back into this game after going down 14-0. It was all of a sudden 14-14, but the Falcons didn't fall apart like they did last year and in several of the years prior, right? They kept going. They kept the foot on the gas. They stayed committed to the run. And the defense took advantage of the 49ers having a very sloppy day and having their own set of injuries, right? Speaking of injuries, it's important to touch on some of them. We did hear from the post game that AJ Terrell says that he's fine, more or less, that it was precautionary to keep him out, which is not surprising given that the Falcons were up 14 with just a few minutes left in the fourth quarter when he went out. No update so far on the other guys, but as of this time, it seems like AJ Terrell, it's not believed to be any sort of long-term or super concerning injury. I'm sure they'll monitor it. He may be limited or not practice. This week, we'll see, but doesn't seem like there's a lot of concern with AJ Terrell, so that's obviously great to hear. Haven't heard anything about Oliver or Hayward. Hayward looked like a shoulder thing. We'll see. Oliver, I'm not really sure. But again, considering the situation in the game where the Falcons were up big, the Falcons just sort of letting these guys just sit, which I think is smart. So we'll see if there's any concern there. Long term this week, I'm sure we'll get an update on Wednesday. But at this time, I'm not overly concerned. But, we'll have to hear more about these other guys. So I don't know if you guys have seen the video on Twitter, but apparently like the whole offensive line and Arthur Smith just like chugged Bud Lights in the locker room like after the win. So that's pretty great. Good job by them. That's my coaching staff and offensive line right there. Just chugging those beers after the W. It's fun. Like it's nice to see, right? That this team is going to be able to hang with good teams. The 49ers just dunked on the Panthers last week, right? And they were injured in that game too. Nick Bosa went out in that one. They didn't have Kinlaw or Armstead. Like a lot of the same stuff. They lost Emmanuel Mosley in that game. Like this was not a drastically different 49ers team than the one the Falcons faced today. They put up 35 on the Panthers, who are believed to have this really good defense, and really shut down the Panthers offense, which is bad to be fair. This is not, a fluke win. Obviously, the 49ers are not at full strength. No one's saying that they were, but they were showing that they could get it done against other offenses with injuries. They were still the number one defense with players missing. They still had a lot of their really terrific players. Charvarius Ward has been playing awesome at corner. Obviously, Fred Warner, terrific. Maybe the best linebacker in the NFL. Talanoa Hufanga and Tashawn Gibson playing awesome at safety. So, this is still a defense loaded with playmakers, some of the best in the league. And the Falcons dominated up front against a reserve defensive line, and they really took that really good secondary and second level sort of out of the game with how well they were able to move the ball on the ground. So, just a great game plan. I wonder now if we will see Michael Pruitt added to the active roster. With sort of Anthony Firkser probably heading out. It seems like they want to keep Franks over Firkser. Maybe the upside, the size, the athleticism, I get that. But I think Michael Pruitt has absolutely earned his spot on the roster. He just offers a lot more as a blocker, and with this team clearly making the run game a huge priority, I think you just need all the good blockers you can get. Because, there could be injuries at the position, right? You need extra blockers activated because you don't want to have to go away from your tight end heavy game script if that's working for you if you have injuries. And Michael Pruitt has been a very good, effective blocker. Clearly capable as a receiver, too. So I don't know what you really lose in that transaction. Nice touchdown catch for Pruitt. Nice throw there by Mariota. To me, the concern is the defense. I do think that they played well. Obviously, they got those 2 picks. They got that forced fumble. They're opportunistic. They shut down the run game of the 49ers, which has been known to be one of the best in the NFL, has been statistically, certainly at this point in the season. It's not like a terrible defense. They do not rush the passer effectively. So if they go up against a really dangerous passing attack and the Falcons offense is struggling, that's how they're going to lose games. That's how they got into trouble against the Bucks. They couldn't stop those dump offs. They couldn't stop the short stuff. So that is a long-term concern. But again, we mentioned it. This is a defense working with very few resources in terms of cap space. The Falcons, I think, made an effort to really fix the offensive weapons and get the secondary sort of at least in a place where it's serviceable to good. The defensive line, still very much a work in progress, especially the interior. I think they've got something with Ebiketie, and Lorenzo Carter's a solid rotational guy, but they really need that dynamic top edge to really help this pass rush get there, and they need a running mate for Grady Jarrett. Taquan Graham goes out in this game, and they just really struggled to rush the passers. So I think that's where you will see a lot of money put into this team, is on the interior defensive line, at edge, the trenches on offense as well, whether that means, re-signing McGarry or going after a higher, ceiling tackle. I think early draft picks likely to be focused there as well. I think certainly Elijah Wilkinson has been completely serviceable. So has Colby Gossett. So that doesn't seem like a screaming need like it was before. But I think, you keep looking for an impact player there. Maybe you don't spend a lot of money, but you keep sort of throwing, day 2 picks at the interior and seeing if you can get a gem in the rough. That happens all the time on the interior offensive line. But this team looks in a much better place than they did going into the season because we've seen what we needed to see from certain key guys. We needed to see this team unearth some gems, like unearth some guys that the rest of the league had overlooked, unearth some players that they could count on going forward for not a huge amount of money. And they have. Caleb Huntley is a big example. Tyler Algier clearly capable of carrying the load if needed. We also have seen on defense D. Alford at the nickel to slot corner spot. Richie Grant has clearly turned into a high-end starter. Jalen Hawkins, solid starter so far this year. Troy Anderson looks like a guy. Rashawn Evans looks like a guy. Michael Walker has had his ups and downs, but has certainly spent some time getting to the place where he needs to be. Arnold Ebiketie, Lorenzo Carter, Taquan Graham, like they've started to find players that maybe these aren't starters on a great defense, right? But maybe they are quality pieces that you need to fill out your roster with. And maybe now the Falcons are in a position where they can go into next season with some money, with some ability to make things happen, and they can go add a few key pieces, a few key stars, maybe even trading for expensive veterans that other teams are trying to get rid of, to really, fill out this roster with guys that bring that star power. And I think, people have mentioned it, like Daron Payne is a guy that I would love to go after. There are, I think, it's a better crop, I think, of interior guys than edge guys. So it may be a situation where the Falcons go sign some interior guys in free agency, and then they look for that edge presence in the draft. But I haven't really paid that much attention to the draft class so far. Thankfully, the Falcons look like they're going to keep draft takes away for at least a little while. But everybody knows about Will Anderson. There are clearly some good players there. There are a lot of good interior players as well. Everyone knows about Jalen Carter. So there are certainly some opportunities there for the Falcons. We got some donations here from Mad Tom K with the $3. What's up, Tom? He says, no, it's early, but I really like the idea. Speaking of, signing Daron Payne as a running mate for Grady Jarrett. Dude eats runs up the middle alive and has pretty good mobility for a nose tackle. Yeah, I think Payne is really good. He has been for several years. I think he offers you a good pass rushing ceiling too. I think getting an impact nose tackle that has that size is something they're going to want to do. Maybe Timmy Horn continues to develop into something like that. But if not, I think like signing someone or going after a nose tackle on day 2, like a Travis Jones this year, a similar player to that could be a good idea for them. Nose tackles tend to fall if they're not like this elite, sort of Jordan Davis type guy. But I agree. I think Daron Payne is certainly someone to circle as a potential Falcons target. George Costanza with the $3. What's up, George? He says, O-lines love those run-heavy game plans, but let's be real. Mariota's still a liability in the pass game. They can't throw deep, which is why we even have big, tall receivers like London and Pitts in the first place. Getting a lot of targets. Lamade Zaccheaus is getting a lot of targets, but can we go over the top, please? Yeah, I mean, this version of the offense, I don't think is like what they want long-term, and we've talked about that. I do think that Mariota is clearly stewarding the offense well enough for them to win, but I think that we're still going to probably see Ridder at some point just because, but only when he's ready, right? I don't think they're going to force him out there if Mariota is playing at a serviceable to good level. It's going to be like when this coaching staff believes that Ridder is ready to go and they think that he gives them a better chance to win football games, then he will play. I don't think he's going to play before that. Now, maybe that's week 8 and they feel like he's ready to go soon. Maybe it's, towards the end of the season if the Falcons have a winning record and are doing well over this next, stretch of like 7 games or so. So it really depends on a lot of things that happen. But if the run game is really good, you could definitely see that being a catalyst for Ridder coming in as well, because you don't necessarily need him to go out there and do a whole lot, at least early on, because of how well the run game is humming. You don't necessarily need the quarterback to go out there and sling it and be dependent on to score like 3 or 4 touchdowns through the air. They do need to know what they have in Ridder, but again, I don't think you force it. I think that you wait until he's ready, and as soon as he's as soon as you believe as a staff, as a team, that Ritter is going to give you a better chance to get that W, he needs to play. But until then, I wouldn't rush it. Let's see what happens. Obviously, the game plan with Mariota worked to perfection today. Mariota, to his credit, very accurate. Made the plays that he needed to make, especially as a runner. So, until Mariota really screws up or Ritter proves that he's just the man, or God forbid there's an injury, right? No one's hoping for that, to be clear. But Mariota has never played a full season before. I think he's been better about sliding, and I think that will help prolong his longevity here in Atlanta, and hope that he can stay healthy, certainly. But, we will probably see Ritter at some point for one reason or another, and we need to know what we have there. But I don't think you force it as long as Mariota's able to win you some games and the Falcons are in the playoff picture. You don't force anything to happen. Yeah, if he stopped fumbling, he stopped turning the ball over, right? So those are the big issues, and if he can get those issues under control and play well, then you don't force a change. But good on him, good on the offensive line, good on the defensive line for making things happen here in week 6 and all the weeks before, right? Yeah, guys, I think we pretty much covered all the big bases in this game. Pretty remarkable that the Falcons get outgained almost 70 yards total. Have almost 200. The 49ers had almost 200 more passing yards than the Falcons. It just didn't matter because the Falcons were so dominant on the ground and they controlled the line of scrimmage, controlled time of possession, and of course being 9 of 14 on third down helps a lot. Great game there, certainly on third down, getting it done. Apparently I'm going to have to come off my hey, stop running on second and long mantra because this team is just so good at running. And to be clear, if you can legitimately get over 5 yards a carry, then running on second and long isn't as big of a problem. But they've never been able to do that before this year. So, really appreciate everyone for hanging out with us today, enjoying this dub. Enjoy getting a win against a team that was predicted to come away with the win in this. When the Falcons were significant underdogs earlier in the week. Now, of course, not they've beaten the 49ers. They were 4-point underdogs. At this point, I think they were 6-point underdogs to go going into the week. We'll see how they look against the Bengals. I do expect that they will once again be underdogs against the Bengals, and it's on the road as well, of course. So, if you guys really want a pregame show, we could consider doing that, right? In the past, it hasn't really been something that has taken off. The pregame shows have kind of been really quiet when we've done them, so we stopped doing them. But if you guys really want that is something I would consider certainly starting up again. But let me know. Guys, really appreciate everyone for hanging out today. Definitely like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Help us out. Help that channel grow. Click that bell if you want to get the notifications when we go live. And you can look forward to lots of great content on this game coming this week. The film review will be on Tuesday. And then, of course, you can check out the next live show on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. We break down everything from this week. Guys, if you want to help us out and support the show, you can join us on Patreon. It's patreon.com/Falcoholic Live. Get early access and high-quality ad-free versions of all podcast episodes, including the versions of these live shows if you don't catch them on video. And, of course, access to some exclusive perks like the fantasy leagues, like the Q&A, which I promise is coming as soon as we get, the guests for you guys. I don't want to do a Q&A with, just me. I feel like that's, not enough to justify you guys' time. DK, send me that beer, man. I'm excited for that. If you can get that going. We got one final donation here from George Costanza. He says, with the $3, I'm going to claim my donations to the show on my taxes. Maybe I could come up with enough to overcome my tax deficiency. I framed that $9 letter. Couldn't believe they sent it out to me. Go Falcons, going to the Super Bowl. It's thank you, George. I certainly wouldn't contest that if you want to try to overcome that $9 deficit by donating to the show. They, maybe it's, only $9. They might not care, but as we both know, they definitely do care. Yeah, guys, thank you so much for tuning in with us today. Like I said, like and subscribe. We will see you guys over the next couple days for more coverage of the Falcons. Now back to 3-3. Just one more really tough game in this 3-game stretch. Falcons are now 1-1 in the stretch. If they get another dub next week, they're going to be in really great shape. But even if they lose it now that they've got the one dub, they're in good shape going into this next stretch of games, starting with week 8 against the Panthers, where they're probably going to be favored in most of those games. So good place to be here, all things considered, for the Falcons. But guys, again, thanks so much. I'm Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin. Check out everything on thefalcoholic.com, all your written content needs. Check us out on the Falcoholic podcast. If you have trouble making these video shows, you can always listen to the audio after these shows are over. But yeah, guys, thanks again for everyone tuning in. Enjoy the dub. Enjoy tonight's football game, and we will talk to you guys next time here on the Falcoholic Live.